In the history of television, no show has been more bent out of shape, pissed over, necrophiliacally defiled and desecrated, screwed over, taken advantage of, ripped a new one, been done dirty, shat on from a great height, had all of its orifices gagged and pounded in an unremitting franchise bukkake, been co-opted and bastardized and fucked up beyond all recognition than Doctor Who. And it's absolutely been done by design, by a cadre of people that seem much more interested in their activism than anything creative that they've been hired to do. In recent years, the venerable British institution saw Doctor Who regenerate as a woman who declared, "I've had an upgrade." Then there was a speculated lesbian relationship with one of her companions. Then the show was retconned so that the original Doctor was a black woman. And then one of the Doctor's companions was transgender. Then there was an episode where the transgender companion's non-binary transcendent oneness effectively saves the cosmos. Then there was a wheelchair-bound woman who shoots lasers out of her wheelchair. Then there was the favourite recurring baddie of Davros, bound in a kind of wheelchair life support system, who was then reimagined as able-bodied to prevent any associations between disabled and evil people. Then Sir Isaac Newton is suddenly from India. Then David Tennant's Doctor gets lectured about pronouns. Then the new Doctor implies that he's had a romantic relationship with Harry Houdini. Then there's a huge campy song and dance number featuring Doogie Howser. Then there's a bi-generation with the new Doctor being a gay black man, who was depicted in the new trailer getting down in a nightclub, with the actor tediously expounding on his grievances and trite aims for the show ad nauseum in the media. Speaking with Entertainment Weekly about the show, Ncuti Gatwa discussed what was on his wish list for the Doctor. He informed the outlet, "I need a big dance number. That's what I'm going to put into the universe. I need the Doctor to have a big, fierce dance routine that, like, destroys a monster with twerking. Or maybe some death drops, and that's what will drop the monster." While discussing the costumes for the show that designer Pam Down had shown him, Gatwa told Entertainment Weekly, "She laid out her sketches on the table and I saw kilts and skirts and all kinds of gender-pushing, societal-pushing outfits, and I was like, yes, let's do all of them." Whether he was being frank or partially glib doesn't matter. It's the overall tone and tenor and the sense of entitlement about what can be done with the character of the Doctor. The Doctor, through all his iterations, has always had abiding characteristics, because the alteration of his physical appearance didn't simultaneously alter his fundamental identity or persona. His intrinsic identity was maintained through the regenerative process. Each successive actor would put their own idiosyncratic take on the character, whilst faithfully adhering to and observing the essential aspects of the character, because they were essentially the same person. An eccentric, slightly dotty apprehension of things, which was nonetheless subdued and not overplayed. An intellectual curiosity and penchant for going for a toddle through unfamiliar and even dangerous locales. Without being overly eager or looking overtly for thrills. Protectiveness, without being overly emotionally demonstrable. And an often overlooked or forgotten aspect in the more sensitive modern age, he could also be short with his companions, drolly chiding them for being a little slow on the uptake. He could become flustered, but never overly excitable. He was super intelligent, but also prone to absent-minded and abrupt diversions. But Ncuti Gatwa and the new writing team seem to be going with the premise that the Doctor is far less the extant, continual Doctor, and is a wholly new persona, one with a sparkling personality and contagious energy, that the Doctor's intrinsic persona is going to abruptly change to wanting to shake his ass in a crowded dance club, to have big flamboyant dance numbers, defeat a monster by twerking, and comport himself in a way that, in an airy coincidence, is like a sex-positive, identity-driven millennial. This is the key reason why this series of Doctor Who is destined to fail. People want to see the Doctor, not as a white heterosexual man per se, but as a brilliantly devised character with familiar contours to his characterization. Gatwa and co. want to discard those contours wholesale in a misguided bid to reinvent, to modernize, to bring the viewing public up to speed, to subvert in a way that is playful, audacious, a little in your face, and teeming with energy and acceptance and diversity. The new Doctor Who has the worst possible thing you could imagine. Pizzazz. The Doctor is endearing. He was never meant to be cool. There's nothing wrong with wanting to put your stamp on a character, but if you wholly reimagine it in your own image, then you do a disservice to that character and come across as narcissistic. Piss off, you lightweight, flaky twats. Gatwa said, "The show was so quintessentially British, and it's a show that has accumulated the power to reflect where Britain is societally. I was like, it would be really interesting to travel through all the subcultures of Britain that it's had in the past up to now through his clothes. This character represents the UK in a weird way, almost like Captain Britain. So how do we tell that story through fashion?" Yes, the show has accumulated the power to reflect where Britain is societally. And sorry, Gatwa, but you and the production team's indulgent antics are not using that socio-cultural power accurately or responsibly. Your vision of a bright and jolly and energized sexual and racial and gender utopia and shuffling of society into shape is not where Britain is at. It's an aspirational vision of yours that most of the society around you doesn't especially want to partake in, and in fact comes across to that generality as a loud, lame, preening, tacky load of old toss in which you've centered yourself, zipping and gambling across the screen, looking like a total div. As reported by the Daily Mail, Gatwa previously said, "As I say, I live in a very leftist, liberal bubble, and in fact there's a really great episode coming up next year where we lean into that." So you're not reflecting where Britain is societally. By your own admission, you're taking a venerable old institution you had nothing to do with devising and creating and building a fan base for, and piling in great heavy shovelfuls of your own political messaging, constructing narratives and imagery and tropes that are very leftist and liberal, and contradicting yourself by implying this is generally representative. And in a kind of Schrodinger's bullshit, pitching back and forth whenever it suits between depicting what's current society and what society ought to be, and, even more sanctimoniously, depicting the world as it will, in your eyes, inevitably be. So you're treating us to the doubly annoying spectacle of literally preening across the screen and figuratively preening, showing how enlightened you are, with the show, in your estimation, being a means to give society a bit of a nudge along so we can all catch up to your egalitarian wankfest of an ideal world. I don't want to come across as too judgmental or lose perspective about the travails that come to make up a life. By all accounts, Gatwa's acquitted himself well enough in some Shakespearean productions over the years, and has a clutch of BAFTAs to his name, and the undercurrents of tensions that a young man of colour must inevitably experience throughout their formative years are more than worthy of reflection. Gatwa's family having emigrated amidst the upheaval and outrages of the Rwandan War is also poignant. It also happens that, in migrating to Scotland, the family found succor and comfort in a society that is pluralistic, diverse, and defines itself by, and seeks to do the best it can to live up to verities and principles as an enlightened and tolerant democracy. That's why it's a shame that Ncuti Gatwa came across like a complete twat and talked a load of old bollocks when he made further comments to the magazine Attitude for its May-June issue. Asked about backlash on his assuming the role of Doctor Who and his battle for acceptance, he said, "There's so much white mediocrity that gets celebrated, and black people, we have to be absolutely flawless to get half of that. This is such a prickly and asinine thing to say. Its nasty little relativism and skepticism about achievement standards disparages and undermines, by implication, the struggles and accolades of innumerable white people inside and out of the film industry, denigrates the performing arts structures that saw you showered with praise and reviews, and swats the nose of the industry that has demonstrably become so permissive, so obliging, so keen to account for itself, that it created the conditions for you and the BBC writers to indulge themselves to ludicrous excess with ultra-ideological Prissy infusions of identity politics into the show you're helming, in a wider industry that has bent over backwards to bend conventions and even historical accuracy to bring in colorblind casting to enable black actors to play Tudor Queen Anne Boleyn or an 11th century Danish Viking, and made revisionist black characters of upward social mobility the norm in Charles Dickens and Jane Austen style shows or adaptations. Also, if mediocrity is such a bugbear to you, diversity, equity and inclusion, or DEI, has vied with achievement, merit and potential as the official policy in a host of UK institutions, leading to an acceptance of mediocrity in the interests of social justice. Ugh. Gatwa was asked about the UK's discourse around gender diversity and trans identities. "Everything trickles down from the top," he said, "and when you see politicians openly attacking marginalized communities, when you see our politicians openly attacking trans people, it makes it okay for everyone else. And it's scary to see that we've got to a point where it's fine to attack vulnerable people, because that's essentially what's happening. People who are the most vulnerable, the most disenfranchised, most disconnected from everyone else are being told that they are the threats. Tolerant stances on the transgender issue are held by the majority of UK political parties, and in case Gatwa hadn't been keeping up with current events, Scotland's bizarre SNP has quadrupled down on pedantic protections for marginalised people, arguably at a disproportionate expense of common liberties of expression. For the record, he seems oblivious of the fact the British Prime Minister is Indian, the Scottish First Minister is Pakistani, and the Welsh First Minister is Zambian. He added, "It's sick because it's a hiding away of your own ineptitude. You're going to put the blame on immigrants, black and brown people, trans people, queer people. To hide the fact that you are not doing anything for people, it's easier to just create discord among people, to divide and conquer, isn't it?" Gatwa said that we've got to keep pushing for more, lots and lots and lots and lots more diversity, lots more inclusion on our screen, lots and lots and lots of it. The other issue where Gatwa has a blind spot is his disproportionate emphasis on identity has intrinsically adult overtones. Being your ideal true self and being true to your identity is valuable, but ideas like sexual autonomy, sexual pride, pride in visibility, expecting to be a role model for acceptance through unabashed expression of identity in that regard, is either overtly, or through visual coding, or contrived analogies whereby identity, and in particular marginalized identities, take on a consequential role in saving the galaxy in the fabric of time, as happened during the Christmas specials, well, then that is not really in the spirit of Doctor Who, which is, for all intents and purposes, a children's show. No matter how empowered and fabulous you want to be, it's just not really the right context. A transgender actress who partook in the show said after the announcement of her casting that during her youth she had disappeared into Doctor Who, found a lifeline of escapism in it to get through much of the dark times. And herein lies the ideal truth. The genius of the Doctor's conception and development as a character, the escapist drama and fun of his adventures, the wistful idea of companionship, of exciting conceits and imagination, that is the swelling heart of the show. That and the cleverness of the science and mechanics of time and world-building and adult dialogue and ironies and drollery would inevitably alchemize to appeal to youngsters. Dumbing down the science fiction in favor of more fantasy elements, maundering on about diversity, jarringly adding on-the-nose sexual and gender minorities, and trying to fill the show with pizzazz. It all sucks and misses the point and wrecks the charm and lectures the audience and turns the beloved dotty old show into modern garbage. There's something intrinsically post-war Britain about Doctor Who, a culture of Morris Minors, village fates, bakelite radios, BBC radio dramas, flock wallpaper, cardigans, wellies, choral groups travelling by coach, licorice laces and Oxfordshire toffees, county cricket, Vaughan Williams, Ealing film toffs, and panto. And from that world you get a Doctor Who has these little affectations. He drives a 1920s roadster, or he has an absurdly long scarf, or a sprig of celery in the lapel of his cricket blazer. It's so intrinsically English, and it's subtle, and it's sweet, and it's a bit dotty. Ncuti Gatwa envisages a Doctor Who is compassionate, accepting, and loving. But Doctor Who was never loving. He was beguiling, charming, utterly free, protective, morally decent. But the Doctor didn't love you. He was an ancient character. Relationships had a different inference. He didn't try to empower you, or mentor you, or expound on society. He was purely on his own terms. He was endearingly enigmatic. Ncuti Gatwa will not be. The show has only lost viewers since it returned last year. The first standalone episode featuring Gatwa, The Church on Ruby Road, was one of the least watched debuts for a new Doctor in the history of the show. It only saw 4.7 million people tune in to the episode in the United Kingdom. The episode only outperformed the first episode of Doctor Who, An Unearthly Child, that saw William Hartnell play the Doctor. That episode, which premiered back in 1963, only brought in 4.4 million viewers. Subsequent episodes of Hartnell's Doctor saw viewership balloon to 10.4 million by its 10th episode. Not only was Gatwa's first standalone episode of The Doctor the second worst debut for a Doctor, but the episode had the worst ratings for a Doctor Who Christmas special ever. Doctor Who's dead, and Prissy activists killed it. Go suck a bag of dicks.